Hiring the right people is one of the most important things you'll do as a leader. But even the best intentioned interview processes can fall victim to unconscious bias, leading to decisions that aren't based on merit and you missing out on great talent. The reality is that we all have unconscious biases, and if we're not aware of them, they can influence our hiring decisions in ways we don't even realize. So, what exactly is unconscious bias? And more importantly, what can you do to reduce its impact in your hiring process? Well, unconscious bias refers to the social stereotypes we form about certain groups of people without even being aware of it. It's the snap judgments we make based on someone's background, appearance, or even their accent. And these biases can stem from experiences, from cultural norms, or media representations, and they influence our decisions in ways we wouldn't consciously want them to. In the interview process, unconscious bias can show up in several ways, like affinity bias, or favoring someone who reminds you of yourself, such as a candidate from the same university or hometown as you. Confirmation bias, which occurs after you form a first impression and causes you to look for information that confirms that impression while ignoring anything that contradicts it. Or the halo and horns effect, when one positive or negative trait colors your entire impression of the candidate, regardless of their overall fit for the role. Now, the biggest issue with unconscious bias is that it can prevent you from hiring the best person for the job. It also leads to a lack of diversity within your team, which research has shown reduces innovation and overall business performance. But the good news? Well, you can take steps to reduce it in your hiring process. There are some practical things that you can do that will help you to reduce unconscious bias and to make better, more objective hiring decisions. One of the most effective ways to combat it is by using structured interviews. In a structured interview, every candidate is asked the same set of predefined questions and their responses are scored consistently. This allows you to compare candidates fairly and focus on the skills and competencies required for the role rather than how well you click with them. For example, using a competency-based framework like SOAR, or Situation, Objective, Action, Result, will ensure that candidates are evaluated based on evidence from their past behavior. And instead of asking open-ended questions that allow for bias to creep in, you'll usually ask for specific examples of how the candidate handled relevant situations. And that will give you a clear sense of their capabilities and reduce the risk of subjective decision-making. Another approach that's been gaining in popularity is blind recruitment. And this is involving removing personal details like names, gender, age, and photos from resumes before shortlisting candidates. When interviewers don't have this information, they're less likely to make assumptions or to let irrelevant factors influence their decisions. And while blind recruitment can help with initial screenings, it's really important to pair it with other bias reducing measures throughout the interview process, because bias can still emerge during the face-to-face interactions that happen. So blind recruitment is just one part of a solution. A key step in addressing unconscious bias is making sure your interviewers are aware of it. Providing training for everyone involved in the hiring process can help them to recognize their own biases and take steps to counteract them. The training should focus on the different types of bias that can arise during interviews and practical ways to reduce them. Alternatively, a diverse interview panel brings multiple perspectives to the table, helping to counter individual biases. So, for example, if one interviewer feels an affinity for a candidate because of a similar shared background, then others on the panel can bring balance to the discussion by focusing on the candidate's actual performance and qualifications. Having diverse viewpoints on that panel ensures that your hiring decisions aren't skewed by one person's unconscious biases, and it helps create a more inclusive hiring process overall. And finally, as always, continuous improvement is key. After each interview process, gather feedback from the hiring team about what worked well and where bias might have crept in. Regularly review your hiring outcomes to see if there are patterns that suggest bias, such as consistently favoring candidates from similar backgrounds. If you constantly refine your process, you can make sure that unconscious bias doesn't undermine your efforts to build a strong, diverse team. Unconscious bias is a real challenge that every company faces, and it isn't just about fairness, it's about making better hiring decisions and building a more diverse, innovative, and successful company.